All right, Professor Penny, I'm going to go ahead and give a walkthrough of my classes that I have, the diagrams, to kind of explain them, and then use the code of reference to explain why I did what I did. Okay, so if I open up my screens, the main Redbeard class is my game class. I'm holding a reference to all of the game screens. So if I showed that in my code, be here. So I'm actually storing a reference for the main game screens as I'm creating them and holding them there, so that I can use it to switch screens using this right here. Going to the next one. Doing my the map setup with Box 2D, using the main game screen as that is touching. It's got dependency, but I'm not storing anything for the utility class, which is running the maps, and then when I need to load them, I load them doing the load map assets. And then the physics manager, which I can hold for the different pieces, like the scales for pixels to meters, meters to pixels, just accessing it straight through there. So it's just touching that. The map manager, which is being created in the main game screen, but also has static things for me to access. Does have a map, but it is just a pointer that is being loaded for each of the maps that are inheriting from the map interface. The map factory, which is just dependent for the map manager, is holding a reference to the different maps, but it's not actually creating them. Well, I'll show you. And then I also have my level collision generator, which the main game screen creates an instance of, and then is pulling a class inside the level collision generator, so I can just default all the shapes. So to show in the main game screen, when I initially set up, I'm setting up for my map manager. I'm creating that and holding a reference. When I go into, the level collision generator right here, which I'm holding a reference, and then I can call the map manager to get a current tiled map and build the physics. So let me go through the map manager first. Here's the map manager. When I want to load a map, this is where I'm touching on the map is just a pointer, and I'm using my map factory to get the map by the map type that I give. So then going into my map factory, this is my map factory for getting the map. Again, the map is just a pointer, and I am holding, maybe I might need to change that. I am creating and then holding a map table of each of the different maps, so I don't have to reload them again. So if it's not there, if it's null, then I'm creating a new one, and then I'm adding it to the map table and then holding it there. And then returning that map back to the map manager. Each individual map holds the map path that's currently being set up right now. So then it's being called by, I'm using the super constructor to pass in that map path because it's extending that map class. Okay. And then the level collision generator. basically what I'm doing is I'm pulling in the map data, and I'm only really holding on to it long enough to get the layers, so that I can pull all the different objects off of it. So rectangle, polyline, polymap, or polygon, circle, and then attaching the fixtures, and then I can pull all the different data off of it. So the level geometry class, that's right here. All it is it's just really holding a shape, and I can just pull it to return a shape, and set a shape. Okay, so yeah, so okay, I am holding a reference to the map factory. Okay. So that's really all that it is. I'm just holding a pointer to the map, but then in the map factory, I'm actually holding a reference to the individual maps based off of what map type it's passed in. Thought I did it a little bit different. That's right. Okay. This is my move to system. This is using Ashley, so this is talking to the different components. Now I do have a dependency where it's not really storing information, as well as an actual pointer to each component, and I'll show why it's like that in code. My entity manager is what is actually holding the reference to the move to system, so I'll show that as well. All of my systems are set up very similarly. So in my code, entity manager is actually created by the main game screen. There's entity manager right there, which I'm passing in, a couple things. And then when I go into entity manager right here, this is where I'm actually holding a reference to those systems, and then I'm adding them to the engine to be used for the Ashley component systems. Let me just double check. Okay, so then the move to system, let me show that. Oops. The move to system, here's the move to system. Okay, so the pointer that I'm actually holding right here, that is this, where I'm using the component mapper so I can pull the specific pieces. Now this depends on the entities that I have for where that's actually located for the different entities. And then in my update is when I am holding a dependency for those individual things, pulling from the entity, but then I drop it as soon as we get done through the update. So this allows me to map quickly, kind of like a one-for-one, to those components for the entity, and then I store them as a variable just to use it during the update. So that's why I have those two different types of dependencies set up. Render system is also going to be kind of similar. I'm holding for the component mappers to the texture component and the physics component, but then I'm also holding a pointer for those individual items. So that pointer is for my component mappers, and then the dependency that I'm not really storing the information for is just for the updates. And then I'm hitting a dependency for the physics manager, again, for having the scaling, and the render system is held by the entity manager, as what I showed. In my entity manager, I have for render system, animation system, move to system, my random system, my position system. Okay, so that's why it's holding that reference. And then when I go into my render system, I am pulling from the physics manager here just so that I can get the right pixels per meter. And my component mappers, those are the pointers, and then I have my dependency that's not storing any information. When I go into the next one, animation system, it's going to be really kind of similar. Again, I'm holding the reference to the entity manager, and my component mappers all have the pointer stored for each one of the components, and then I am using a dependency during my update that I'm not really storing. So if I went into this to show it, so there's my component mappers, and then here in my update, when I'm pulling all of the entities that have certain components attached to them, I'm storing things, and then I'm using that for the update, and then I'm dropping. I'm not holding it past the update. So this is what I would use for getting the case. I do need to know, my state component in which direction. I need to know what texture I have, but only, for the purpose of that update, and then I can pass it and update the information using the component data bags. Okay, position system. Okay, so here's my position system. Again, reference is held by entity manager, and then I have my component mappers to be able to link to those position components really quickly. So it's just holding a pointer, and then I have basically a short-term dependency to all of those components, because I only need to know in my position system. I'm updating from the physics body to the X and Y, and then I'm using the X and Y when I help to render. So I'm touching to physics manager, and then getting the X and Y position. So I'm using the component mapper for box 2D body, which I'm temporarily storing while I'm processing it. And then I update the X and Y positions of my position component. So I guess I technically need to have dependency dashed line for the physics manager here. My bad. Controlled movement system. This one was a little bit harder to set up. That's why the game input, you guys are mentioning that I'm also holding it in the main game screen, as well as a controlled movement system. I am storing a reference to the game input. I'm creating it in the main game screen, because if I did it nested in anything, it didn't work. So then I would have to pass it along, pass the reference along to the controlled movement system, and then I had access to it. So here, position component, all my components, again, they're storing the component mappers, so that's the pointers, and then I have like the short-term dependency just for while I'm doing the updates for controlling the movement. So if I showed that in code, controlled movement system. Now this is really only going to be for my player, but I have the component mappers when I am actually doing the constructor. I'm passing in that game input from the main game screen so that I can be able to touch the game input and pool information if something actually happens. So then in my update, I'm going through the entities, which should be only one, temporary storing information so that I can check if like an input was touched or what the tap count was, and then I can use that to set my player touch control component. I can set the tap for that and pool if the input was processed, which that is just a Boolean. And so that's how I was kind of using to set up this. So what I wanted to do is I wanted only like once a tap was set up, that is going to set up for the best direction for them to face, since I'm only doing the 4 cardinal directions. So I'm looking for the shortest distance to basically like the X and Y of the player. So the shorter Y distance for the shorter X distance, the absolute value of that, the player is going to be facing the longer direction, and that way I'm putting it down only to 4 cardinal directions, even though they're going in diagonal. So that means I need to, change my state component to moving. I need to change my direction to the direction I'm facing so I can have the right animations. And so this one is only going to be used for moving locations. So once that they're set as the control is tap, then I should not be able to, what I was finding before I set this up is that the animation was not interacting. I was stuck on just the first keyframe. So now that it's locked, that I have it, I can register, if the input was actually processed, and then I can go back to my control none, which, I can pass that back in. And then when I'm in here, this is where I can pass my target that I want to move to. So I can put that in my move to component as the target and give the touch coordinates that I have captured from the game input. Okay. Okay, entity creation. In the main game screen, I am touching a static class for spawn generation. These components, I could have as many as needed as the entities that I have from my tiled map data. So I'm storing a reference to all these components in the spawn generator, but I'm not holding any spawn generator information for these actual components. So if I have more entities, then that's why I actually have the multiplicity on this one. I am touching the body generator because I'm going to be passing the information for which type of player, and then it's going to be using the body generator to generate that stuff from a JSON. I am touching the utility to make sure that my textures are loaded for my for my animations. I'm doing an atlas, texture atlas. And then entity manager, I'm only touching this, but in a static sense, just to set the player so that I can get the player from other locations. Okay, so then in code, this is what it looks like. My spawn generator here. This is my spawn generator. Wait a minute, did I change that? Okay, that will have to get changed. Spawn generator, main game screen. Might have changed it where I did actually create an instance. Yep. Okay. I did create one. Okay, so let's check that. I am storing it. So this will have a main game screen is going to have a reference to spawn generator. So I'm going to have to change that piece. But in the spawn generator, when I'm spawning the entities, it's going to go through the current map, and then it's going to pull the spawn player, and it's looking for the keyword spawn that I have for my tiled map. So if I was looking at this, spawn is looking for that keyword to check for the entity, and then it's looking for those X and Y values for where they are, and then I go into my switch. So if if the case was that the entity was a player, then it's going to be setting up all those components. So I have my animation component there, where it's setting up everything, all of my components that I have for the player, all my components that I need for the roving NPC. So if I need to add another enemy, would be fairly easy to implement changes. Also, this is the location where if I'm just trying to test something out, So like my static NPCs, when I was trying to test something out, I just pulled off the engine for adding it so that I could just, check my other stuff and just leave them kind of go. And then I have, a default. So if it wasn't able to find anything, then I need to get messaged. And then I can dispose. Okay. So that actually should change. Let's flip that. That's holding a reference. Okay. And then my last one, this random system. Okay, again, it's holding the component, so it has a component mapper, so it's got those pointers, and then it's got like a short-term dependency while I'm in the update. Now, for the random system, I have it statically accessing the map manager, just so I can be able to pull current map data to find the height and width, so I can make sure that when I give a position for the player as a move to target, that it will be within the bounds of the map, and then the entity manager is holding a reference to the random system. So in code, this is what it's going to look like. All right, so the random system, there's my component mapper, so it's holding the pointers, and then when I'm updating, and now this one I'm actually using an interval system, so it's doing an update like every second, so it's not trying to change everything, because right now I'm just using random variables for generating the different states. So it's pulling, if you should use the randomization. And then right here is where I am pulling statically from the map manager to get the pixel width and pixel height. And then I can set that for my range, so it's not going to go outside of those bounds. And then here is where I have basically about a 10% chance that the player is going to be moving in a down direction. 10% right, 10% left, 10% up. And then I have a 46% chance that the player is going to be getting a target. So also 10% for idle. The 46% is if I'm using that move to target. So if he doesn't have a target, then I'm going to say he has a target, and I'm giving him the target from what I randomly generated here, right here, which is a component bag for the random component for the X and Y, and that's what I'm passing as their move to target. So I give that position, and then this is the same setup that I had for which direction the characters are going to be facing, so that they're stuck in only one of the 4 cardinal directions. Now, the move to system will start moving the player as soon as he has not arrived. Okay, so where did I set it? So I have it set as true, and then I set it as false when I'm ready to move. If I don't do that, he tries to move before this has been run through, and I need it not to do that. Okay, so this is basically my random system, and that is all my classes. I do see as I was going through it that I got maybe a couple changes, but that's why I have those double. Now, as I'm debugging stuff, a lot of the stuff I have left as public, I am going to, harden that and make it so they're private on most of the things. But when I'm trying to set up these components before I end up getting to it, and I'm still kind of debugging, it's easier for me to just hit the component and hit that variable, make sure that works, and then I can make that change and actually add those getters and setters. Okay, so that is why you see a whole lot of public stuff. I am slowly changing it as, I find out it's working exactly how I want to. So that's why I said that I have it that way. Maybe that's not good practice. I just kind of start with public and then start taking away accessibility to things as I, find out that now it's working how I want it to. Okay. So that's all of my class diagrams. Here's my description. I'm going to put this on YouTube and then I'll give you a link. All right. Thanks a lot, Professor Bang.